Part 1. The first to arrive at the tryst near Malvern was the man from the north, Harold of the Hare's Foot. He was glad to get there. February was no season for journeys. The ponies were mud to the saddle girths, and the whole world seemed dissolving into the mizzle that drifted from the west. It was a mistiness full of danger, both solid and ghostly, hiding bog and pitfall from the wayfarer and subtly changing the shapes of natural things into other likenesses. The old gods were dead, his father Nut had told him. Thunor, no longer, hurled his thunderbolts, and old Grim, Woden's earthly self, had ceased to walk the uplands with his mantle over his one-eyed face. But Harold's mother and his old pagan nurse hadn't been so sure. Now, riding through the cloud-wreathed forests, Harold was not so sure either. He hoped the meeting would be worth the trials of reaching it, and he hoped Godwin would not be late. They had picked a very secret meeting place. Its reputation was so unlucky that only 3 of his men had been willing to go with Harefoot. He had acquired a new recruit near Worcester, however, the younger son of a freeman farmer, with some training in arms, not much use as a fighting man, but an extra rider for the band at least. The trouble with traveling incognito was that outlaws didn't recognize you any more than honest men did. He gathered with some amusement, from drifts of talk behind him, that his 3 regular housecarls were exercising their own fears by trying, without much success, to frighten the boy. The lad was just now saying calmly that he knew how old hands liked to scare newcomers, and that he and his brother used to trick strangers in their village by enticing them into the pen of the local bull. And then we'd let Thunderer out of his shed and sit on the gate telling them how savage he was. "And was he?" asked one of the housecarls, interested. "No, that was the joke. My mother hand-reared him from a calf, and he only followed folk about for titbits," Bran said. A promising youth, Harefoot considered. The last ford appeared ahead, brown and swirling, rain-swollen. Casual talk ended as they tussled with the task of getting 2 mules laden with fuel across without letting their packs get wet. A cold welcome they'd have if the wood and peat went under. There was no dry tinder for miles. Halfway over, one of the mules slipped on shifting river mud, and its pack did go under. Harefoot swore. The ghost village was only half a mile beyond the ford. They rode in single file through what had been its main street before the plague struck it, destroying 2/3 of its inhabitants and causing the rest to flee. Now it was a ruin, the skeletons of old timber buildings standing naked to the weather, grass growing thick on cottage floors, corn sprouting rank and wild in the deserted fields around. But the stone-built church still stood, with its lead roof, fairly watertight even after a quarter of a century. They rode straight to the church door, dismounting to lead the ponies under the low lintel. Inside, the stone-flagged floor was dry, and some old furniture stood about, stools and benches and the like. The sigh of the rain faded outside as they put back their hoods. "Unload the mules," said Harefoot. A tethering line was set up along one side of the church, and 2 small braziers were kindled from the fuel they had brought. Enough remained dry to fill them. The wet wood was spread to dry, along with the soaking mantles. The fodder which each man carried in a shoulder pack was put before the ponies, and the mead flasks were passed round. Of Godwin, who had sent the summons, there was no sign. "Could be his men don't care for this place either," said one of the housecarls, uneasily scanning the building's gloomy corners. "Godwin's men have sense enough to know a plague more than 20 years back won't hurt them," said his leader shortly. "Godwin doesn't believe in anything," said the housecarl. "Or so they say. Ghosts, witches, God or devil. They say he cares nothing for any of them. Maybe his men catch it from him." "Maybe," said Harefoot. Godwin, his father's favorite, the E.T., Earl of Wessex, everlastingly held up to him as an example, and everlastingly beyond his power to imitate. The braziers burned up, and wavering shadows, their own shapes in parody, ran over the sweating walls. Harefoot said, If there is ill luck still lingering in this place, then when the careless Earl of Wessex comes, let it fasten on him. The weather had delayed Godwin. On his journey from the south, 2 rivers had proved impassable by their usual fords. Detours to find usable routes through forest as tangled and wet as seaweed in its natural element took time. He had no housecarls with him. He had instead the company of his 3 eldest sons. He called to Sweyn, who was riding immediately behind him. "That was the last river, I hope." Sweyn pushed back his hood, regardless of the wet, and his sandy hair fell into his eyes. A grin lit up the young virile features. In a few years, Sweyn would be the handsomest male in Wessex, even at 17, with his chest not yet filled. Out, he was impressive. The combination of his mother's high Scandinavian cheekbones with Godwin's stocky vigor was a potent blend. "At least we needn't worry about robbers," he called. "They won't come out in this." "We're out in it," shouted Harold, the eldest after Sweyn himself, and riding on his brother's heels. "We're not robbers." Godwin said nothing. According to Geetha, his wife, their ear Rand, was one far worse than robbery. He looked ahead to where the mists were lifting away on a strengthening wind, and in the vista of winter woods before them, one open patch was visible. They were nearly there. They reached the church at twilight. Within it, Harefoot was improvisedly enthroned on a mantle-covered bench from which he did not rise as the Godwins trooped in with their mounts. The Earl of Wessex took in the makeshift dignity. The uneasy men clustered round the braziers, and the heaps of firewood spread steaming on the floor. "I see you had trouble with your fuel. The river was in flood. You are late." "We too had fords to cross. My apologies. Let me introduce my sons." They came forward in turn. Sweyn. Very respectful, because Harefoot was the son of the great King Cnut, who was one of Sweyn's heroes. Harold, 14 years old with sun-gold hair. Tostig, snub-nosed and tow-headed, who in his own words was nearly 13. Rather than just 12, Godwin explained, smiling. The boys, once presented, withdrew unasked to various tasks, to stoke braziers and set up cooking spits. The northern men roused themselves to help. Competence like a brisk wind bustled through the church, dispelling the shades. It came from Godwin. It put Harold Harefoot into an ideal mood for killing someone. Godwin thought, he is his mother's son. It was an indictment. Godwin had loved his lord, King Cnut, and in return Cnut had made an earl of him and promoted his marriage to his beloved countess, Geetha. Cnut had been a mighty ruler, a great spirit housed in a fine, hard body. In his son, hardly a lineament. Of Knut's strong Viking face could be traced, just a little in the bone structure perhaps, but otherwise, Harefoot's hair had the look of a straw bale, and his weather-reddened features were blurred already with too much food and wine. As a youth, he had been fleet-footed, enough to earn him his nickname. But that was gone now. Soon, he would be fat as his mother now was. Even his pale eyes, Godwin thought, were the eyes of that mother, the ineptly named Elfgift of Northampton. Her parents must have liked her, since they had so named her, and as a girl she had had beauty, that was true. In Elfgift, the straw-colored hair had been 2 ropes of twisted gold, and the colorless eyes had the changeful charm of water under varying skies. But there, the part the elves had in her abruptly ended. A small mind and a grasping hand, that was Elfgift. She was also, and so was Harefoot, a first-class, implacable, and enduring hater. And the person they both hated most in the world was the woman for whom Nut had deserted Elfgift in the end, Emma of Normandy. With, as runners-up, Emma's trio of sons. It was generally accounted a virtue in a woman that she should be fruitful, and all the more so if the fruitfulness took the form of healthy male children. All the same, as Godwin well knew, himself the father of 6 sons and already accustomed To lie awake at night, wondering how to secure their futures, the blessing could be a mixed one. Emma had certainly overdone it. 2 boys by Ethelred, another by Knut. It was the latter who had hitherto incurred the worst of Harefoot's loathing, for Knut, selecting an heir, had passed Harefoot over for him. But at the moment, Harthacnut was far away, and, whatever his legal status, was imperiling no one's ambitions. This time, the exiled sons of Ethelred were the menace to be dealt with. 1,000 pities, Godwin thought, that Knut hadn't seen to it years ago. But even now, it might not be too late. On the far side of the brazier, the 2 of them were sharing, having drawn apart from the rest for privacy's sake. Harefoot's thought, "I hate that woman Emma. She elbowed my mother out of her way and broke her heart. And this man is Emma's chief minister. For all his friendly talk, he's Emma's man and a Southron. Bah!" Aloud he said, "Why have we met? It's a bad season for traveling." "It's important," said Godwin. "Has the news from the south reached you yet?" "What news?" "Your elder stepbrother, Edward the Exile, landed at Southampton last month." Darkness had fallen, and the wind and rain had died away. In the quiet, the rustle of the settling fire and the snort of a restless pony sounded loud. Harefoot grunted sharply, surprised. "Edward? Southampton? What happened?" Briefly, his Viking ancestry showed itself. "He came raiding in January," said the descendant of sea dogs disbelievingly. "There were 2 mild weeks, you recall. He hoped surprise would give him an advantage, I think. He was ill-equipped, however. He was quickly chased off and went back. To Normandy, no doubt. No harm was done. Good, but in that case, why are we here?" "Because," said Godwin, "it is a warning." They had eaten, but the mead flasks were not yet empty. Harefoot passed his to the Earl, and Godwin took a long draught. He saw that Harefoot was waiting for him to continue, having failed to seethe implications. Knut would have been reciting them by now. Pensively, Godwin poked the brazier with a spear butt. He must now raise a touchy subject which was best done with caution, for Harefoot, despite all his stupidity, was dangerous. The Earl said quietly, "Harold Singh, you rule today in the north of this land, but how did it come about? At the time of your father's death, you were not his chosen heir." Harefoot regarded him suspiciously. "I should have been. Perhaps. You were the elder. But nevertheless, your father had named Harthacnut his successor." "Harthacnut," said Harefoot, as if his half-brother's name tasted foul. "That woman's brat, Emma's brat. You know the tale. Why ask me? Harthacnut wasn't here to claim his rights. He was up to his eyeballs in a war in Denmark, so my father lost his wish. Serve him right for sending Harthacnut to Denmark to begin with. He always wanted Harthacnut to have everything, Denmark and England, both." "Yes, yes," said Godwin soothingly. He did not like Harold Harefoot, and there was no doubt that in his choice of an heir for England and a regent for Denmark, Knut had been acting on better reasons than mere blind favoritism. But one could not expect Elfgift or Harefoot to agree with that. Their loathing of Emma and all her works, including her offspring, was natural enough. The offspring he had come to discuss, however, was not Harthacnut this time. He went on smoothly. Because Harthacnut was in Denmark and could not come home, other arrangements had to be made. Finally, you were given the north to rule, and Lady Emma was given the south to hold in trust against her son's return, with you as overall protector. But the south at the moment has no real king." "At the moment," said Harefoot. His eyes gleamed. "As you say, it could fall into your hands in time, if you are quick enough to seize your chances, and if you are clever enough to outwit your foes, for you have foes, and Edward the Exile and his brother are among them." "That woman," muttered Harefoot. He took back the mead flask and swigged deep. "They are the sons of a lawful king," said Godwin carefully. "Ethelred was duly crowned, and anointed. Your father's family took England from him by force. His children have a claim. Up to now they have been quiet in Normandy, no trouble to anyone. But last month, with your father not dead a year and the South in uncertain hands, one of them comes out of hiding and attacks. What does it look like to you?" Harefoot had understood now. He glowered. "They think that this is their chance? Is that what you mean? Did Edward come with Norman backing?" "Not much beyond a handful of men and one ship. But next time he might come better equipped. Next time he might come not as a raider, but as a claimant, with an army. Then there would be a war, which you might not win. The Normans are a warlike race." Harefoot was still scowling. "What is it to you? You're Emma's man, they're Emma's sons, and Emma's Norman. Them or Harthacnut. What is it to you?" "I was your father's man," said Godwin calmly. "My loyalty is to his house, to the house of Nutt. Do you want this menace removed from you? That is what I called you here to ask. If so, I can remove it." "A bold and mighty claim. How? We can't invade Normandy to kill them." "No, but we can tempt them out of Normandy and kill them then. The way to deal with a well-supported foe is to cut him off from his support. What if the two of them came to England not as raiders or invaders, but as guests? They could easily be taken then. Who'd do the taking? You? You, I think. I would represent the host. And your name would stay unsullied, if you like to say so." The risk of a slur on her husband's name had been Geetha's final argument when she fought against this project. "I will protect our name," he had said, to quieten her. "Very well, so I take them." Harefoot grinned. The idea did not seem to displease him. But who in God's name is going to invite them here in the first place? They've no friends here. Even their mother hates the sight of them. She hated Ethelred. Haven't you heard the story about her when Edward was born? She looked at him when they put him in her arms, saw he was a copy of his father, and threw him bodily at Ethelred, shouting, "He's yours, so take him, he's none of mine." I've heard it, and I don't believe it. But even if it's true, it was long ago. Everyone knows the marriage was a disaster, and everyone knows Emma was a she-devil when she was young. But she's not young now, and she's alone. Why should she not soften and wish to see her first children again? I think they might well believe in an invitation from her. "You first have to get her to ask them," Godwin smiled. "That is already arranged." "4? You mean that woman? But even she wouldn't." "Normans are strange folk," Godwin said meditatively. "It must be a queer country to live in now, with no overlord. They say that since the old Duke's boy was brought back from the French court, he's never been able to live in the ducal castles because of the unrest, and he's being secretly reared in peasants' huts on his supporters' estates. Must be an odd life for a boy bred to a court." Harefoot waved this aside, not interested in infant dukes, whether in huts or in castles, even as an illustration of Norman eccentricity. "You had better tell me the rest of this plan," he said. "By all means," said Godwin equably. "I have a manor in the Surrey district, on the Pilgrim's Way. It's called Gildenford, and there are caves. The boy Brand, 15 years old and raw from the farm, became a sworn man to the Earl of Wessex the day after he first left home. No one was more surprised about it than Brand. He had never left his home before, except for a night or two at a market, and the strangeness overwhelmed him from time to time like a squall of rain blown in his face. Yet he had been well prepared. "No one will throw you out of your home," his father had said 3 years ago, between the rasping breaths of his last sickness, which seized him after he was caught in a storm while searching for a lost cow. "But our bit of land will feed. Only so many. Orm will marry soon, and then children will come. You'll want to marry in time. And there's Edgava. Finding her a husband, not easy. Unless the saints she keeps praying to take pity on her face, or you find an obliging blind man." He tried to laugh, choked, and rested. Then he said, "I've taught you and Orm to use a sword. My advice to you is this: practice with it. Then find yourself a good lord and follow him, as I did." He turned his flaccid right hand palm up on the rug of cobbled skins that covered the bed. "This won't hold. A sword again. I've two. Somewhere. When you go, take the best. Orm won't grudge it, and listen. Whoever you follow, serve him well. Go where he leads you. Fight his foes. In return, you get food, clothes, a roof, maybe land enough one day to raise Amai, your own sons on. That's the bargain. You understand?" He had lasted a few days after that, growing weaker hourly it seemed, but still able to talk, sometimes in a hoarse, whispering fashion. Bran's mother brought her husband hot potions and steaming inhalants to ease him and tried to smile at his croaked sallies. She would not weep where he could see. Towards the end, he rambled and told his sons a tale he had told them several times already, over the years, but could not now remember doing so. The telling was especially aimed at Brand. A story for you, Brand boy, to remember when you have a lord to follow, about the men of Sinewulf, king of the southeast Saxons 300 years ago, they say. Sinewulf was slain at night by a rival's men. His voice faded, but he signed for the herbal drink that stood by his bed, and his wife held it to his lips. The straining voice went on. His own men found him dead in the morning. The rival offered them gold and freedom if they would go away in peace, but they would not. They fought his followers to avenge their lord, even though they were outnumbered. Even though their lord could not come back to life, even though it meant the deaths of all of them as well. That's the service you'll owe your leader. Brand, boy, so choose him well. Except for some confused murmurings and repetitions of his wife's name, those were his last words. Brand had not forgotten them, but obeying them was another matter. How did an inexperienced lad from a farm, even if his father had been a Thane's follower, even if he had learned to use a sword, go about choosing a leader? One could not put prospective overlords in a row and look at them. You took what came, your way. Orm married, as their father had expected. His wife conceived, and for all their assurances to Brand that they did not wish him away, he knew that he must go. And when a few days since, he and Orm realized that the little party seeking a night's lodgings at the farm were more important than they looked, they agreed that here perhaps was Brand's chance. "It is King Harefoot. I saw him close to once. At a horse fight," Orm swore. Brand felt doubtful, not of Harefoot's identity, but of his rightness as a leader for whom he might one day have to die. He was not much taken with Harefoot's looks, but he supposed he was no judge. The offspring of King Canute must be of another race of beings from himself. He made his offer and showed his father's sword. Harefoot stared at him with round, pale eyes and said he could use another rider. "Got a pony?" he asked. Brand had. He and Orm had caught a couple of wild hill colts 2 years before. Breaking them in was hard work, but at the end, both boys could fairly claim they could ride, and they had steeds to prove it. Brand's was black, short-legged, hairy, and tough, with an endless capacity for eating. Brand named him Greedy. Harefoot, hearing that the mount was provided for, nodded. "Then you can come. We leave at daybreak." He asked for no oath and made no promises. It was not at all the arrangement Brand had been taught to expect. He tagged along with the other housecarls, wondering if he were one of them or not, and now it appeared that he was not. He stood at Greedy's side in the church as the light of another new day spread slowly through it. The saddle girth was in his hand, and the oldest of Harefoot's housecarls, standing in front of him, was pointing a thumb in the direction of the Earl of Wessex, that southern-speaking stranger who had swept in with his handsome sons the night before and who looked much more like a king than Harefoot did, and saying, "You go with Godwin of Wessex, Not with us. He says he needs another lad. The housecarl walked away before Brand could reply. Not that a reply was needed. No one had offered him a choice. He had heard of Godwin before, naturally. A great name, a great leader, famed from the Wash to the Welsh March, from the Scottish mountains to the Isle of Wight. His chief home lay far to the south, at a place called Winchester. In Godwin's service a man might look for a fine future. But just now Brand would gladly have traded all that unknown future, however splendid, for a glimpse of the wooden farmstead and the smell of his mother's stockpot. Winchester was so far, away it might as well be Jerusalem, and besides, his father had said, "Find yourself a lord, choose." Well, he hadn't privately considered Harefoot much of a prize, but at least he had gone to Harefoot of his own free will. Now event, that was gone. Harefoot was handing him over and Godwin accepting him, as though he were a spare mule and his own opinions nothing. He dragged the girth tight, his vision hazy with anger. When he straightened up again, Godwin was standing, where the housecarl had been, waiting for him. Never, throughout his HF, was Brand good at finding words. Asked to describe someone he had met for the benefit of someone else, he would say uncertainly, "He's dark," or "She's pretty." Pressed for more detail, he might add, "He's useful with an axe," or "She laughed a lot." Pressed still further, he usually gave up and became tongue-tied. Only once in all his life did he fully break the barrier down and put a deeper knowledge into speech. Of Godwin he said, "He seems so alive, as much more alive than an ordinary man, as an ordinary man is more alive than a corpse." It was a tribute to Godwin which only Brand himself fully appreciated. When he met William of Normandy, he saw the man for the talent and talented eagle he was. But when his wife asked what William was like, he only said he was clean-shaven and magnificently dressed. Godwin was neither. He had a dun-hued cloak thrown, back from mail of metal rings and leather, and he had a strong, springing beard, dark brown with red glints in it, like his hair. It did not hide the jutting line of his jaw. He had hazel eyes, green in this cold early light, which glittered under point-arched eyebrows. Every part of him, hair, beard, eyes, even the placing of his feet a little apart and the set of his hands on his hips, spoke of his vitality. He said with a smile so full of charm that Brand blinked, "I must ask your pardon. My Lord Harefoot let them tell you before I found a moment to ask you for myself. I want you to ride south with me. I can offer you a life worth having if you were ill. Take service you with me. The best training and a chance to see the world. What do you say?" Brand twisted a lock of Greedy's coarse mane round his forefinger. "I've heard it said that great men send their sons to you to learn, and sometimes you refuse them." He looked nervously at Godwin. "So I don't understand." "You heard aright. But why I ask you to come is my own business. Yours is to decide whether you will or not. Well, since Harefoot no longer wanted him, and since he could not go home, it was a smaller choice than Godwin made it seem, but at least it was a semblance of a choice. And if he had not been taken with Harefoot, he was very much taken with Godwin. Then the Earl himself spoke again, and clinched it. "I saw your face when the housecarl spoke to you. You felt as if you were being passed from hand to hand, like a package or a thrall, did you?" "Not? Your name is Brand, I believe. Brand, there are no thralls in my following. You will come as a free man and freely take the oath of loyalty to me, and in return I will be all that a lord should be. And if I had any of my own men here, you would see for yourself, from their horses and their arm rings, that I keep my promises. Now what do you say?" This was a marvel, not only that Godwin could read his mind, but that Godwin had actually troubled to read it. And here at last was the pattern his father had led him to expect, the given oath, the received rewards, the acknowledged bond between leader and man. Brand knelt on the flagstones of the church, put his hands between Godwin's, and formally swore to be loyal to him, to fight for him, and keep his counsel. As the oath was completed, Godwin pulled him up. He looked at the sword Brand carried. "I suppose you know that that blade is too big for you? It was my father's. Keep it in memory of him then, but I'll find you something better to work with. I will try you against my boys on the way home. If I am to teach you, I must find out how much you know. Are you ready to ride?" The journey, on which they did not hurry, took 4 days. The weather had changed during the night they had spent in the church, and they set out through clear air under a high, pale sky with a southwest wind blowing. Brand was given a mule to lead, and he rode behind the Godwin boys, shy of attempting any conversation at first, but finding them more natural companions than Harefoot's men, who had strongly resembled outlaws in appearance. In the course of the first 24 hours on the road, he learned that what he knew about swordsmanship was next to useless. Even nearly 13-year-old Tostig could have sliced him into mincemeat. But his eye with a bow was fair, and he was handy with an axe. He admitted that he was used to chopping down trees, and then regretted it when he saw that Swine's face was full of derision. Swain, alone of the Godwinson brothers, seemed unwilling to be friendly. At the start of the journey he had, as it were, sampled Brand's possibilities, but after finding out that Brand was not yet interested in girls, he had dismissed him as unworthy of further attention. Swain had recently discovered that there was a separate race of humankind on Earth known as the female, and all conversation with him, no matter where it started, in a very short time worked its way round to this enthralling topic and the even more entrancing subject of Swain's own success with the wenches. Brand did not respond, and Brand was therefore nobody. A nobody, Swain's expression made clear when he heard Brand's unfortunate remark about woodcutting, who actually imagined that an axe was a laborer's tool. Brand was relieved when they set off again, and Tostig came to ride with him instead. Tostig was good company and did not seem conscious of any difference in status between Brand and himself, for a while. Brand forgot about it, too. The land changed as they went. They passed the nights in farmsteads or monasteries, and each day's riding brought subtle differences in the landscape. On the 4th day, the track left the forest land to run along the crest of a high, short-turfed ridge. In the distance were other bare hills, gray-green in color and open to the sky. Brand, used to a forest-bounded village, felt a foreigner here on this empty plain, and he thought the vista desolate. The wind rustled in the winter grass in a fashion quite new to him, as if people he could not see were whispering together. As they came out into the open, Harold reined in and waited for him. As Brand and Tostig, who was still riding with him, drew alongside, Harold began to tell a tale of a long-dead hero called Arthur. Brand had heard the name but couldn't recall in what story. Arthur, it seemed, had lived here and fought over these hills, and was buried somewhere among them, and would one day return to fight for his folk again. Tostig chipped in, and before Arthur, before the Romans even, there were giants. They put up a great ring of huge standing stones not far away. "We'll show you one day. They'll amaze you." Clearly they didn't amaze these Godwinsons. They belonged here, lived at ease against this background of bleak, empty hills, of immortal heroes and stone-tossing giants. Brand looked from Harold to Tostig, wondering. Homesickness, kept at bay these last few days by the comfort of his oath and by the interest of traveling and trials of arms, surged back. His sense of being different and of a lesser breed surged back with it. He was alone, hopelessly divided from his companions, a creature of earth looking in astonishment at the bright hair and glowing faces of beings from the sun. He wondered suddenly what kind of W-elling his new lord was taking him to. At the same moment, Godwin, riding ahead, let out a shout and pointed. "Boys, where are your eyes today? There it is, our hearth smoke." The Godwin Hall amazed him quite, as much as the giant stone ring was likely to do. He had never seen such a place in his life. His first view of it consisted of its ditch and palisade, an enormous palisade, stretching away to left and right, encircling what seemed a vast tract of land. It was made of stout split logs, W with their curved sides outwards. Once through the gate, he saw that other logs were nailed crosswise on the inside. Within the wide enclosure in the center stood the hall itself, high-gabled and commanding, with smaller buildings clustered about it like chicks round a hen. The nearest had its door open and he saw ponies tied inside. It was a stable. From the mouth-watering smells that issued from another, that one was a bakehouse. But he had no chance to take in more on account of the bemusing animal and human chaos which now enveloped them all. Geese cackled and chickens clucked, getting in the pony's way. Dogs bounded out, barking. People of all sorts and ages seemed everywhere. Leather-clad housecarls, scullions with aprons, children running, womenfolk in long, bright-colored clothes, boys in a group round an older man, W-ho-W, as drawing something instructively in the earth with the point of a stick. Tostig made signals at him, and he followed into the stable to put the ponies away. After that, he found himself with the others at the door of the hall. 3 smaller boys were there, younger Godwinsons, he supposed, with hair respectively copper, honey, and white fair, as if the smallest one had been left out in the sun too long. Among them, standing peacefully still because the center of even the most dizzily spinning world does not move much, and she was the center of Godwin's vital planet, stood a W. Oman Wuho. Brand saw at once was Godwin's countess. She was taller than her husband, who stood beside her while the little ones leapt and yelped like puppies round him. She had the Danish face, strong, slanting brows that swept low towards the nose, a strong, slightly concave profile with wide-sprung nostrils, high cheekbones, a short upper lip. Harefoot had the same cheekbones, his inheritance, from Danish Kainat, but where his features were coarse, Geetha's were cut cleanly. Her honey-colored hair was braided and twisted round her head like acro N, unveiled in defiance of fashion, and her well-shaped ringless fingers rested serenely clasped on the bulk of an unborn child. Githy of Wessex, mother of the 17-year-old. Swain, and likely to be grandmother soon if Swain's talk were backed with action, wash yourself still fruitful, she said as Tostig led Brand forward. Godwin, we have a young army, the royal bodyguard, no less, eating itself to death in this house, and I add a son to the strength every second year, yet you still bring me more. Her voice was warm, a little husky, a little accented in the Danish way. She smiled at Brand, and his homesickness eased. My husband says your name is Brand. Welcome to our hall. This is my wife, the Lady Githa, Godwin said. She looks after us all. More than that. Laughing, Githa swept them all inside. It will be my business, Brand, to feed you, dose you if you're ill, set your bones if you break them, listen to the tale when some girl breaks your heart, and mend it for you by making you run so many errands you'll have no time to think of her. Come now, eat with us. You are our guest on this, your first night with us. Afterwards, this will be your home. Brand made suitable replies. The inside of the hall had just staggered him all over again, as much as the outside had done. It seemed huge, cavernous as a cathedral. Yet it was a home as well, he saw as he looked about. Fresh rushes, sweet with rosemary, covered the floor, and glowing tapestries lined the walls, except near the door, where the household weapons hung. But even they were a decoration. Swords arranged like the spokes of a wheel, pikes like a great open, fan, axes forming a round arch over all, blades at the top and handles converging inwards. A fire burned at the central hearth, and now Tostig had drawn him to a bench beside it, and Githa, beckoning, had summoned a thrall with ale and meat pasties. Godwin had lingered behind with the smaller boys, and for the moment Githa was in command. Are you from the Welsh March? She was asking. You look as though you could be part Welsh, with that black hair and your brown eyes. My mother is half Welsh on her mother's side. My grandfather met a Welsh girl at a market during a quiet time when there was trade across the border, and they ran away together. But my father was a Saxon. He followed one of King Canut's northern thanes. A good heritage, Githa approved. Tell me. She broke off at a noise behind her. Godwin? Godwin shook off a swarming heap of his younger offspring. He picked rosemary out of his hair. You have more than enough sons, he observed. God send that the next is a girl, another quiet little Edith. By the way, where is Edith? Shouldn't she be here? Why, yes, Githa looked surprised. The convent sent to say that the illness was still troubling it and we should keep her for another month. But her gaze lit on her younger boys, who had drawn together at the sound of their sister's name. Girth, she said to the copper-haired one, about 8 years old by the look of him. A son, every second year, had been an exaggeration. Girth, where's Edith? It was the white-headed 4-year-old with the innocent face who was pushed forward by the others, as if they were chess players and he was a pawn. We tied her up, he explained amiably. You... Where? Demanded Githa. And why? In your bower, mother, said Girth, since this seemed too complicated for his junior to answer. He looked anxiously round for more substantial protection than his smaller brothers could offer and drew closer to an amused Harold. We were playing outside, he explained hastily. We didn't run about in there or anything, but we thought she might get cold if we left her on the ground. We just carried her in and put her on the bed. We haven't dirtied anything. Go, and untie her at once. What in the name of all the saints together were you playing to? English and Vikings, said 6-year-old Leofwin, the one with Githa's honey hair. She was a captured heathen. We'll go and get her. They trotted happily out. Godwin, said his wife exasperatedly, what are you laughing at? I pay the earth to have my daughter reared in a nunnery, said Godwin, shaking with merriment. And when she comes home to play with her brothers, they at once decide she makes a perfect little heathen. He cocked an ear. A frightful din had broken forth outside, compounded mainly of young humans in various states of rage and anguish. A perfect wildcat would be more like it just now. Harold, go and separate them before they actually kill each. Other, that Brand is a nice boy, Githa said. The evening meal was eaten. Edith, flaxen hair tangled and eyes bright with fury, had been soothed, brushed, and coaxed to make peace with her brothers. Now, the pallets of the household had been laid on the hall floor, Brand's among them. He had been left at last to find his level among the other boys. Githa and Godwin were in their own sleeping house. Some yards from the main hall, it was heated by braziers and lit with lamps. Githa had sent her woman away and was combing her own hair out. Godwin, already stretched under the thick fur rugs of Thebed, saddle-weary bones thankfully eased on a down-stuffed mattress, watched her, hands linked behind his head. Will you keep him when he has done what you need? Githa asked. Why not? Harefoot was right. He is promising. Good nerves and an even temper, and very good reflexes. I watched him when he tried himself out against the boys. Githa sighed. I've done as you asked, she said, but I don't like it, Godwin. Do you want to see Ethelred's sons making war here, seizing power? King Canut was part of your family. You should have some feeling for him. He wasn't blood close. No, I don't want to see the Ethelredsons here, not because of Canut, but because being Ethelred's boys, they may be like Ethelred and therefore poor leaders. But a woman shouldn't be entangled in a plot to kill her own sons. Her voice was tired, flat. She had said it so often. The earlier times had been more violent. Godwin had laid his hand over Hermouth once, saying, For the love of God, they'll hear you in Winchester. He gazed thoughtfully at the still lingering teeth marks, Ash said. Her family life has not been like ours. It is not so unthinkable with her. I want to save lives, Githa. I want crops growing, not trampled flat by armies. I want cattle droppings, not blood, spread to help the corn to grow. We have contenders enough without these two pests as well. I intend to be rid of them. Our good name may be the worse for it. Harefoot's men are to snatch them out of my helplessly protesting hands, said Godwin with a faint smile. And since Harefoot has even agreed to be away on the Welsh border, when we are arranging the visit, it will look most unlikely that he and I are in partnership. I have tried to protect us. Geetha laid down her comb and began gracefully to work on her nails. Without looking up, she said, I think it would be a good idea if you arranged for them to be attacked by pirates on the voyage over. No one would point at either us or Harefoot then, if he cares about it. Half the shrewdest moves of Godwin's life had been Githa's ideas. She usually voiced them as casual asides from some totally female activity, such as baking, beautifying, herself, or, on one occasion, giving birth. It was this astonishing duality of the untrammeled mind in the desirably female body which had drawn his eyes across a hall in Denmark, long ago, when in the train of Knut he had dined in the household of Knut's sister Estrith. Estrith's husband was a nobleman called Ulf, and someone, jogging Godwin's elbow, had said, That's Ulf's sister there. A handsome girl, isn't she? But stare you down as soon as look at you. She's turned down 3 good husbands already. But her eyes and Godwin's had met, and she was not staring him down. They regarded each other with something they would have called recognition, except that they had never met before. Their minds saluted one another in that long glance, and their bodies, a hall width apart, longed and fretted to do likewise. That evening, later, Knut said, You seemed mighty taken with the Lady Githa tonight. I, said Godwin, who hadn't thought it so obvious. Time I found you a well-dowered bride, said Knut. You've earned the honor. If you can recommend yourself to Githa, I will bless the marriage. I warn you, she'll take some winning. There's no forcing that one. His voice was offhand, but suddenly his eyes danced. I wish you luck. Come and tell me how the sport goes. So Godwin went to Githa in the morning, cutting her out from her companions as they rode out hawking, and before the time of candle-hating, she had agreed to marry him. Sanut was pleased and frankly surprised. Luf, when he heard of it, was unashamedly relieved. Now, 7 and nearly 8 children later, Githa's quality of mind was unchanged. Godwin was a Christian, nominally at least, and Githa was decidedly pious. It would have shocked her to know what he was thinking, that if the old goddess Freya, Earth Mother and Corn Queen, had ever walked on earth in a woman's form, she must have been much like Githa. But she did not guess it, for she was thinking of something quite different. I can think of no better safeguard, she said. But, oh, Godwin, is there no other way? I have borne children. I know. For the sake of Mary, Mother of God, can we not do it without Queen Emma? It will bring the wrath of heaven on us. Our children are so strong, so handsome. I live in dread of disaster for them, of death in battle, or capture as hostages. To do this is almost to court such things. I know. But they are likelier to happen in the war that the Ethelredsons will almost certainly bring. We are safer without them. God can do anything, said Githa. He wouldn't need the Ethelredsons. She stopped working on her nails and came to him. He looked up into her eyes and said, When you are happy, your eyes are blue, like the sky, but when you are anxious, they are as gray as the North Sea in a storm. They're gray now. Githa, don't be afraid. Trust me, I shall bring our ship safe into harbor. I hope so, said the Countess of Wessex grimly. Robert, Archbishop of Rouen, was in the habit of telling guests at Rouen Castle that he was keeping it warm till Normandy produced a ruler strong enough to live there openly. The guests, surreptitiously drawing their mantles more tightly around them, would wonder if they were supposed to laugh. Neither fires piled high with logs, nor the heat of midsummer could disperse the chill of that mass of gloomy masonry. It was a grey stone keep, its few private apartments mere cold, poky holes hollowed from the thickness of its walls, the hall itself cavernous and inexorably cold. "You are supposed to laugh," Robert would tell them if they didn't. Merriment's an antidote to frostbite. Returning from a ride on a March afternoon, under a sky the color of steel and through a wind full of small, sleety teeth, Edward and Alfred took their mounts to the stables themselves and rubbed them down in person. It was as good a way of working, up a glow as any. They could not hope for much more warmth inside the castle than out. The work done, they climbed the narrow stair to the chamber which, as well-born guests of the castellan, they had been given to sleep in, and shut the low door behind them, pulling its curtains across to keep out draughts. The brazier had been lit for their return, and fresh clothes had been laid on the wolfskin bedspreads. Edward regarded these kindly preparations with distaste. "At times," he said, "I envy my sister." "Why?" Alfred inquired, beginning to shed his hoarse aromatic garments. A page appeared with a pitcher of hot water and a basin. "The service is excellent," he said as the page withdrew. "What has God-gift got that we haven't, except sorrow? We aren't mourning dead. Spouses, at least. Even that might be better than— What have we done with ourselves all day, Alfred? Recite it." "Got out of bed," said Alfred obediently, dragging off his boots. "Went to Mass." "You read books with your friend from Jumigus Weil." "I went to the Mews and talked hawks. Then we ate and went out." "Yes, challenging, wasn't it?" "One would not want to appear rude," said Alfred, sponging mud off himself. "But your one attempt at taking up a challenge washardly successful now, was it?" "I was chased ignominiously." "Out of Southampton, you mean?" Edward was not annoyed, only thoughtful. "It was the wrong challenge. I went raiding in a fit of temper. But that's not the way to claim one's rights. The priest who confessed me afterwards said so. It did well enough. For our ancestors. It still does for people like the Vikings. They're only half civilized. But we've gone beyond that. I want something real to do, but that wasn't the way to find it." "Go on pilgrimage," his brother suggested, emptying the basin out of the window and refilling it for Edward, "like Drogo or Duke Robert." "Oh, pilgrimages," Edward said, in tones of such bitter detestation that Alfred's eyebrows rose. "You sound as if you don't approve of them," Alfred remarked. In sudden anger, Edward said, "Do you? Our sister has been widowed because her husband went on pilgrimage and never came back. And here in Normandy, do you notice nothing as you go about day by day, Alfred? Do you ride out with your eyes shut? Today, didn't we pass a burnt-out farmstead? And didn't we ride through 2 separate hamlets and see not a soul? You'd expect someone to be about, even in cold weather, visiting a neighbor or getting in firewood, but no. Well, where were they all? Hiding from us, peering at us through cracks in the timber? They're afraid of anyone who carries a sword and rides on a horse. The whole of Normandy is in a state of anarchy, because her duke is a child, because Duke Robert abandoned his proper business here and rode off to Jerusalem to leave his bones in the sand, and his son a boy to be reared in hiding to keep him alive, while the power-mad barons squabble over the duchy's torn body. Pilgrimages, Edward said again, savagely. Alfred was silent. Edward recovered his temper and said presently, towel in hand, "Our sister seems to be over the worst of her grief now. We ought to find her someone else." "Her boys will need a father," Alfred agreed. "You know," Edward said, reverting to the earlier discussion as he continued to dry himself, "no one would catch me wandering off on pilgrimage if I had lands to care for like Duke Robert. I took an oath to go on pilgrimage once, but I've changed my mind. I'll build a church one day to make up for it, if I can ever afford one. That's what Duke Robert should have done. He threw his life away." "He threw his gold away, too," Alfred laughed. "Did you hear the tale they're telling of him in Byzantium? He wanted to give largesse to the poor." "Nothing wrong with that. Wait, he had his pack mules shod with gold, not nailed on very well. The shoes kept coming off and spinning away as the cab. Alcade went along, and the crowd scrambled for them. "I wonder if the mules all went lame," he added as an afterthought. "I can guess who told you all that," said Edward, somewhat coldly. He disapproved of Alfred's mistress. Her husband was an other pilgrim, this time one who, unlike Duke Robert, had not succumbed to any Eastern maladies and who occasionally corresponded with his wife. "Mabel," Alfred agreed. "Her husband's on his way home," his last letter said. "How disappointing for you. You're sitting on my shirt," said Edward, pointedly dismissing the subject of Mabel. The sons of Ethelred, exiles, pensioners, gentlemen, and ne'er-do-wells, as Alfred had been heard to put it, were not very alike. Their few resemblances were subtle, a similarity in the proportions of body and limbs, and a sufficient likeness in the texture of their minds to let them understand each other's mental processes even when they did not share them. Edward was taller, with his father's mousy fair hair and gray eyes. His beard was thin, and the Norman fashion of clean shaving suited him. Alfred had his mother's dark hair and eyes and her olive-tinged skin. He also had more than a trace of her waspish tongue. She had dished him shortly less than she had disliked Exyward. Hurrying feet sounded on the stair outside. Someone tapped excitedly on the door. "Edward! Alfred! Are you there? It's Godgift, can I come in?" Exlward pulled open the door. "A messenger," said his sister eagerly, almost before she was through it. "From England." In spite of Idahood and motherhood and all the prolonged anxiety of a husband away on the dangerous pilgrimage which had culminated in his death, Godgift looked absurdly young. "It's because she's lived a real life," Edward had once remarked. "We shall age before our time with ennui, you and I, Alfred." "It's a letter from our mother," Godgift was saying. "With herring. The messenger's waiting for you in the hall. Come down with me now." They hurried after her, too surprised for much comment, even if she had given them the chance. In the hall, where the familiar damp chill was staunchly resisting the efforts of the fire to dispel it, a group of English soldiers stood warming their hands at the flames, and a little apart, seated on a bench beside the Archbishop, was another man with the long hair and the gold-adorned dress of a well-to-do Saxon thane. He rose as they entered. The Archbishop said, "This is Thane Edwin, a courier from Queen Emma." Edward went forward, and the thane, bowing, held out to him Cylinder W wrapped in oiled silk and a small leather pouch. Edward opened the pouch, and a ring rolled out onto his palm. "I was told you would know it," Edwin said. "It belongs to the Lady Emma." Alfred and Godgift came to look. The ring was of gold, fancifully wrought in the likeness of a snake swallowing its own tail. The scales were minutely marked. The serpent's eye, enormous compared to its slender body, was a round-cut garnet. "I can't recall it," said Alfred. "I can," Edward said. He bounced it gently in his hand. "My mother had it as a gift from her brother W. Hen, first she came to England. She used to wear it to remind her of Normandy, because hardly anyone wore finger rings in England in those days. She used to show it to people, women mostly, and tell them about it. I remember hearing her. Yes, I know this ring." "I do too," Godgift said. She smiled at the courier. "The token has done its work. Now we must read the letter." Edwin tactfully withdrew as Edward opened the message itself. He unrolled it and read it in silence, while his brother and sister peered over his shoulder. It was short and explicit. "Emma, Queen in name only," it began, "sends all motherly love and good wishes to her sons Edward and Alfred." "At last," said Edward with a snort. "Since I am grieving for the death of my lord and king, and since you are daily deprived more and more of your inheritance, the kingdom, I wonder what plans you are making for the future." Each of the three, as they separately reached that point, paused in their reading and stared momentarily at the others. You must be aware that the delay due to your hesitation is placing the advantage with the usurper, Harold Harefoot. He is wasting no time. He constantly visits villages and towns, winning over the thanes by gifts and threats and prayers. But many would prefer that you should rule them instead. I suggest, if indeed you are interested in establishing your rights, that one or both of you should come to me and consult with me here in England. I can, I believe, help you and advise you concerning the way in which this enterprise, which I wish for, can be achieved. Send back word of your intentions with the bearer of this letter. Farewell, my dear sons. Harthacnut's let her down, said Alfred, breaking the bewildered silence which followed their reading of this epistle. Edward released the bottom edge, and the parchment rolled itself up again. He must have done, he agreed blankly. Our mother would never call to us when she had Harthacnut to summon. It's extraordinary. Well. As you say, well, I could not be more surprised if I came on a vixen hatching chicks. Alfred let out a whistle. You are speaking, said the Archbishop coldly, of your mother. He twitched the letter from Exeward's grasp and read it himself. I am sorry. But has she ever been a mother to us? Could Harthacnut be dead? Godgift asked. That would explain it. Her uncle shook his head. I doubt it. If that news had reached Winchester, it would have reached Rouen as well. But she may have given up hope of his return, Edward said. Magnus of Norway may be starting some new ploy against him. Or perhaps he has simply told our mother that he does not wish to claim his English throne. The Archbishop rubbed his jawline. His eyes were shrewd despite the wateriness of age. I have never approved my sister's attitude to you, as you know, though you will not abuse her in my presence. I have hoped, I have prayed, for a change of heart. Perhaps it has come. Or perhaps we are all she can turn to now, said Alfred. We're the last chance for a son of hers to rule in England, the last alternative to Elfgift's dear little boy. She hates Elfgift and Harefoot more than she does us. Given that she's despaired of Harthacnut, the letter makes sense. I fancy the news of your landing in Southampton didn't escape her, Edward. Edward turned to his uncle. I think we need your advice and your help, he said. But presently, for the moment, it may be best if we talk about this alone together. Will you excuse us? Naturally. I will pray that in your counsel you have the guidance of God. This is a very heavy affair, Exeward. It is not just a matter of how much your mother loves or hates you. Remember that. By silent consent, Godgift was included in the conclave. They sat in the little sleeping chamber, and she perched on Edward's bed, elbows on knees. Edward took a stool. Alfred settled cross-legged on the floor beside the brazier. The torches had been lit in the iron wall brackets, and the room was full of a mingling of faded daylight and torch flames. Outside, it had begun to snow, small, sharp flakes in a gusty wind. So, said Alfred, are we going or not? Edward? If we do, it had better be with good protection, Edward said grimly. If Harefoot heard about it, would even Harefoot interfere with a private visit to our mother? Said Godgift. He wouldn't believe it was anything so harmless, said Exnelfrid. And he'd be right. Edward dangled the scroll between his knees. There are two things, he said. We are invited to do something that we may well wish to do on our own account, but we are being asked to do it on our mother's account. Have we any reason to please her? Our uncle has just said this is a weighty matter. It goes beyond the feelings she has for us or we have for her. Alfred looked up at his brother. This is a kingdom we are discussing, and a kingship. If you achieved the rule of England, you would be Edward Singh. King Exeward. The office should come before the man. Yes. Forgive me, Alfred. You are right. They were quiet for a little while, aware of themselves as an odd and not entirely natural gathering. They were children considering a letter from their mother, but at the same time they were a Witan council considering an act of war. They should have met round a long Witan council table with a bevy of clerks busily taking notes, and a dozen mead benches full of housecarls ready to resolve difficult matters with a vote. The bedchamber was the wrong setting. Alfred crystallized. It for them. If you think we should accept, we must ask our uncle to set up a proper council of advisers for us. But meanwhile, Edward, let me see that letter again. Edward handed it to him. He studied it. It's more vague than it seems, he said at last. She does not say whether we should bring a force or come privately and expect to find a force and supporters when we arrive. She talks of help and advice. That could mean anything. There is not a word about the resources she has at her command, nor of where the earls stand in this. Ascent. They help or hinder. That's important. I take the trouble to keep myself informed, said Edward. Leofric of Mercia would wait until we had prevailed before he supported us. He is a cautious man. Siward of Northumbria has all his territories. In Harefoot's half of the country. We should be lucky to get any support from him. He's Danish-bred, too. Bound to back Nut's house and not Ethelred's. Godwin of Wessex is my mother's chief supporter. I would hope that we could count on him, even though she doesn't say so. Tell us what you think, Godgift, Alfred said, turning to his sister. I know something is turning over in your mind. I can tell by your face. Say it. I wish, Godgift burst out, that you would go for her sake. I think she's lonely and beset. She's growing old. I wish you would go just to help her. Edward sighed. Godgift, you're a girl. She quite liked you, because by the nature of things you couldn't resemble Father Quitty as much as we could, me especially. She sent you wedding gifts, I recall, but she detested us. How can we forget that? Godgift, I loved Father, and she despised him. She sneered at him all the time. She even called him Nithing once, in front of a room full of people, churchmen, thanes, housecarls, all sorts of folk. It was in London, just before we fled from the Danes. I remember that, Alfred said. His eyes narrowed as he looked back into his memories. She was pacing about the hall. She said to him, You paid them off, and still they come. No wonder when it means such easy profit. Why don't you fight as a king should do? You're no king. You're— Don't, said Godgift. It was long ago. Can't we forget? You can't wipe memory out at will, said Edward. She called him Nithing, a nothing man, of no worth. He was sitting in that big chair of his, the black oak one with the ends of the arms carved into wolf masks. He answered her back. He said, You only want me to fight because you hope I'll die in battle. Maybe you'd prefer a barbarian like Forkbeard or Canute for a husband. How extraordinary. I never thought of that before. Thought of what? Asked Alfred. He was right. She did prefer Canute. They were well matched, or so everyone says. She was a barbarian herself towards my father and me. You don't know what happened next, either of you. You weren't there. She went to her chamber to get her belongings, together, to flee. She and women were throwing things into bags. I came in. I was about 11, I think. It was always my misfortune that I took after the English side more than either of you. You're both dark. She saw me and shouted, Get out, Milkface, get out. You look like your father, and I've seen enough of him for a lifetime. You never told us that, said Godgift after a pause. It isn't the sort of thing one willingly tells anyone. Edward paused, thoughtfully. But I'm glad I told it today. It has cleared my mind. I shall not answer this appeal. But— Alfred looked amazed. You were saying when the letter came how much you wished for your own lands to administer. You could be throwing away the chance of getting them. Not quite. Edward smiled a little. I am ceding it to you. One day, perhaps, you will grant me a manor or two? But— Alfred was nearly speechless. Then, torn between natural ambition and fraternal affection, he became nearly angry. I can't go without you. You're the elder. It would be wrong. And we can't stay here either. Dear God, you've said it yourself. Look at the lives we lead. A ceaseless procession from one cousin or uncle to the next. Cousin Alan in Brittany. Charming hospitality and broad hints about how much all the other members of the family must long to see us. Uncle William and you being hearty and awkward and asking what our plans are. God's teeth, what plans? Uncle Robert's the soul of kindness, I grant you, but this castle's freezing. Cousin Eleanor in Flanders, Baldwin of Flanders welcomes. Everyone in his court is nothing but a clearinghouse for fugitives. Every wastrel in Christendom ends up there like driftwood coming ashore. I feel like a piece of flotsam myself when I stay there. We must go to England, and I can't go alone. Edward shook his head. I will not be beholden to my mother for anything. I bitterly regret that I owe my existence to her. You must understand that. And you must also understand something else. There's one possibility you seem to have missed. Only one of us can go. Only one of us dare go. And that one must travel well protected with all the knights that he can muster. The daylight had faded almost entirely by now, and the wavering torchlight made their faces hard to read. He knew, however, that the thought now in his mind had begun to stir in theirs, albeit against their wills. If you won't go, Alfred, I shan't blame you. The choice is yours, and can only be yours because of the danger. Has it not struck you that these fair words and hopeful promises may be nothing, but the bait in a trap? Godgift stood up. That's a vile thing to say. She is our mother, after all. You were never fair to her, Edward, never. She whisked out of the room. The heavy oak door banged. Alfred said, Godgift was always more like her mother than either. Of us. Natural enough, I suppose. They're both female. Edward commented. We shall certainly have to find her a husband soon, and he ought to be a strong character. She is quite a lot like our mother, as you say, and our mother is hardly a weak personality. But we are not discussing Godgift now. We are discussing this astonishing invitation. Well, Alfred, the decision rests with you. As week followed week, Bran learned his way through the mazes of his new life, a life so absorbing, so filled, with new skills and new faces that he had little time to long for home. Indeed, much that had endeared his home to him, such as companionship and the sense of belonging, were abundantly present in Godwin's household. It was a family before anything, whether one was blood-linked to the Earl or not. Days began at dawn, and closed at the big sundown meal where family, followers, thralls, and guests all ate together. It was a time for singing to the lyre, talking of the day's events, squabbling a little, and passing round the mead. Squabbles were mostly muted. Githa would have no misbehavior in her hall. She watched over it from the ladies' table along one side where she sat with the housecarls' wives and the girls whom she was educating for various friends. A tiny frowning glance from her to Godwin at the high table was enough to make him intervene in a quarrel. If the dispute were a true one, the parties went outside to settle it. Guests were always present. Thanes from other parts of Wessex came. Brand was told that Wessex stretched from the Kent coast into Somerset, with Godwin's manors dotted over it and along the South Erne seaboard. Priests and peddlers came, minstrels and merchants, and once a wild-looking sea captain with salt-matted hair and a dented helm, who stayed 3 days, drank the ale store nearly dry, and spent long hours deep in talk with Godwin, whom he seemed to know well. "We'll go to sea ourselves presently," Brand's friend Peter Longshanks said. "The Earl has his own fleet, did you know?" Longshanks, too, was a recent comer, the son of a former housecarl of Godwin's. His arrival, however, had been taken for granted by the other men, whereas Brand was a curiosity. It was Longshanks who told him why. "You've broken all the rules. How did you do it?" "First, you get picked up by Harefoot. You don't think kings usually go about collecting stray farmers' sons, do you? And then—" "He just wanted more riders than he had," Brand said. "And it pleased my family. He's been touting for support in the North." "All right, we'll pass that. But then he hands you on to Godwin. It's a privilege to train with Godwin. He picks and chooses 7 among his own Thane's sons. He only took me, despite my their service with him, because I won a shooting match at a fair, and he thought I might be worth accepting. So naturally everyone marvels at you. Well, I've wondered myself at times, Brand admitted. Swine Godwinson. Seemed to see something comic in it, but they'll get used to me one day, I hope. Longshanks laughed, uncurling his gangling body from his stool as he heard the horn that betokened dinner. Brand had learned his unarmed combat scrapping with a brother bigger than himself, and most attempts to bully him were short-lived. You'll do. You've won a lot of respect already, and sooner or later we'll have another newcomer who'll make a good butt, and then you can have fun making his life hell if you like. They say there's a nephew of Lady Githa's coming soon from Denmark to be trained with the Godwin boys. That might make a diversion. If I have strength enough left to take advantage of it, said Brand. For the days were close-packed. He groomed ponies and cleaned saddlery. He helped the falconer repair the broken feathers of wild passage hawks which had damaged their tails fighting their captivity. He drilled, sometimes with all the rest under Oswald Halfir, the lean, raucous sergeant who had lost part of his left ear in a Danish war long ago, and sometimes with the Godwin boys and the other youths in a junior group. He worked with axe, and sword and stave and longbow, with spear and knife and his bare hands. Sometimes Godwin himself taught them, an inspiring and pitiless trainer, on the stretch of worn grass behind the outbuildings. That march was cold but dry, green grass with brown patches, blue sky with cloud patches, icy fingers and rasping breath, Godwin's eyes calm and impersonal beyond his shield, until the last moment when the tyro's fatal mistake was made, when they blazed in triumph as he sprang to the final attack. The whip-crack of Godwin's voice and the scuffle of feet, all these wove themselves into a pattern of sight and sound and sensation which would be part of him forever, though he did not then know it. My housecarls provide the king's housecarls. When there is a king, Godwin roared at them, and so they have to be the best in the land. Hold that spear straight, boy, straight. A furred peasant could do better with a blasted pitchfork. He took them on one at a time and wore them out successively, knocking them down with a flat-handed swipe when they were stupid. Never mind if your head's ringing. To hell with that. You'll have to fight on through worse than that one day if you want to live. Fight it, throw it off, concentrate on me. I'm coming to kill you. And Brand, staggering to his feet, would raise shield and blade vainly against Godwin's thunderbolt onslaught and find himself once more reeling, disarmed, tripped, flat on his back, pinned under the point of a sword and a tirade nearly as murderous and much less comprehensible. Watch the blades. Watch them, will you? See them shine in the sun, see their movements growing out of each other, like a dance, like words piled up to meaning in a saga. Take what your enemy does as a gift and turn it back on him. Oh, get up, stand back, watch. And Godwin would signal an older housecarl over. Now, in slow motion, see what happens. And Brand would try, shaking the hair from his bewildered eyes, unable at first to make the least sense from such exhortations, for what had swords to do with sagas? Until at last, through the days and the weeks of aching, battered struggle, muscles and eyes, rhythm and reflex began to blend in him, to sound in the lyre of his body the first full chords, until the day when Godwin rested on his sword hilt, wiped the sweat off his face, and remarked, "You're learning." That day was doubly memorable, for on that day too, Bjorn Estrithson, Githa's nephew, arrived from Denmark just as rumor had promised, and as Longshanks had foretold. Brand's own time as a curiosity was past. Bjorn, 16 years old and very much aware of his status as one of the family, came upriver from Southampton on a rowing barge which Godwin had sent to meet him. He brought gifts, a chest-off silks, a peregrine, falcon, and a pair of wolfhounds sent from his parents to Godwin and Githa. He had an escort of 12 Danish housecarls. He was nearly as tall as Sweyn, nearly as blond as Wulfnoth, and he was regarded unanimously by Godwin's sons, with Sweyn as ringleader, as a nuisance who needed to be sat upon hard. Oh, his first evening he fell out with Tostig over the war records of their respective fathers. Next day he resisted contemptuously Thieforts of the old chaplain, Ethelnoth, to start him in his letters. Godwin was lettered himself, and so was Githa, and they required literacy in their family. Beorn said that where he came from, letters were only for clerks and women, not for warriors, and that he was astonished to find his cousins so effeminate. The three largest of the effeminate cousins instantly hurled themselves on him with a concerted howl of fury, and Godwin himself had to intervene to drag the struggling heap apart. Forced to yield and attend to his alphabet, Beorn relieved his feelings 2 hours later by fighting so fierce a wrestling bout with Sweyn that Sweyn, as the only alternative to calling quarter, snatched up a stone and began to pound Beorn's head with it, which was strictly against the rules of the contest. Godwin, summoned once more to arbitrate, lost patience and chastised both parties, giving the major share, however, to Sweyn. Sweyn, with oaths of undying hate and imaginative vengeance, flung himself out of the hall in a rage. Longshanks, watching him, stormed past the weapon store where he and Brand sat scouring knife blades and sharpening them on the grindstone, remarked, "Trouble is, it's more than empty talk. Sweyn can hold a grudge. We're in for lively times if young Bjorn stays." He examined a ground blade critically, testing it with his thumb. "The Countess will be angry. She's short-tempered, with the baby so near." "I wonder if it will be another son?" Brand remarked. "My lord's praying for a girl." Peter chuckled. "Really truly praying, I hear, and he doesn't do that often. He wants a daughter?" "If you were the Earl of Wessex," said Peter, "and you already had 6 sons who will all want earldoms of their own one day, you'd pray for daughters too." "All they need are fairly well-off husbands." The day that Githa's child was born was memorable also. On that day, Brand encountered a monk with a gift of prophecy, observed the Godwins in the throes of what, even for them, was a fairly acrimonious dispute, and sensed for the first time that there were undercurrents in this household, some hidden sources of dissension and dread which he did not understand. It began in the morning, when sleet was falling and weapon practice out of doors had to be abandoned in favor of theoretical discussion under cover. Sweyn had posed a question for the purposes of the theoretical discussion. "If your lord is outlawed," he said, "must you follow him to exile?" Brand knew that a man's life was governed by codes of behavior. There were procedures in time of war for the exchange and treatment of captives. There were obligations in war and out of it between lord and follower, master and thrall, man and wife. What he had not before known was that these rules were subject to rival schools of thought. But in the Godwin household, where almost anything was liable to resounding argument, and the merits of 2 different battle-axe strokes could occupy the whole of a stormy morning, the intangible laws for human relationships were matters for contention just as much as weaponry. "No," Godwin was saying now, walking up and down before his group of attentive youths. "No, you're a freeman. It was laid down by King Alfred that a man might leave his lord and seek another as long as he told the first lord of his intent. But many men would follow their leaders to exile and be praised for it. Loyalty to your leader comes even before loyalty to your kin." "Suppose," said Beorn, cross-legged in the front row, between Harold and Sweyn, "you had some secret knowledge about your lord, where he had a treasure hidden, or a hideout, or a private anchorage, and later you took another leader, and your new lord and your old became enemies? Should you tell what you know to your new lord if it would help him? Not unless it endangered him or his folk, or was knowledge concerning some deed so abominable that no oath could stand in respect of it." "What sort of thing would be that abominable?" asked Harold. Godwin stopped pacing and considered him. "You will know an abomination if ever you meet one," he said. He looked towards the door as it opened to admit Geetha in the midst of her young ladies. Geetha always kept the maidens near her. She guarded them, Swain was once heard to say gloomily, as if they were rare and soluble spices, and in her turn she had been heard to say that she would return her friends' daughters to them dead before she would return them damaged. If she were bringing them back into the hall now, it meant that she expected the men shortly to be out of it. And indeed, behind her head as she stepped over the threshold, one could see a segment of blue sky. The sound of rain on the thatch had died away. "We can go back to our archery, I think," Godwin said. As they were going out, Oswald Halfear beckoned to Brand. "I've an errand to V. Winchester. You'll do. I've a blade at the swordsmith's, having a new hilt put on it. I want it collected. I've no time to get it. You can be back in time for the last hour of shooting, if you hurry your pony. I ought to make you run both ways," he added with a chuckle. "All you lads get puffed too soon. And how to run down a fleeing enemy is part of the job you're learning." Bran nodded. He went to Githa before setting out, in case she had any commissions in the Tau En. It was customary, if sent out on an errand, to ask if there were any others, and Githa often did have small requirements. Not this time, however. "No, Brand, there's nothing, thank you," she said. She looked tired. This child might well be her last, for her face was beginning now to show its years, and there were graying threads in her hair. But she smiled as shedded. "We do have an overdue messenger from Oxfordshire, but I can't ask you to scour the roads between here and there to find him. No. Get Oswald's sword for him and make haste back to your archery." Brand liked the swordsmith's shop. Its specialty was in fitting ornamented hilts and sheaths, since Godwin's men, who were its principal customers, preferred mostly to use the superb blades of the Rhineland rather than English ones. But the swords would be finished here, and the oak plank walls were patterned with hilts, gem-studded and silver-adorned, awaiting collection, and with sheaths as decorative as the iron blades they sheltered, were businesslike. It was impossible not to linger here, however much of a hurry you were in. The smith, for one thing, never handed a sword back without drawing it half a dozen times to make sure it drew smoothly and gave no trouble to its owner's grip. When eventually Brand mounted his pony and set out for home, he knew he would have to hasten if Greedy could only be got to hasten, which wasn't likely. He was relieved, therefore, if slightly surprised, when his urgent heels apparently produced a response, and the pony broke from a slow jog into a canter. Then they rounded a clump of trees, and he realized that his urging had nothing to do with it. Greedy had smelt other horses and wanted to reach them. It was a party of 3 monks. One had been thrown and was sitting at the roadside examining his elbow. The other 2 were wheeling about on their own ponies, trying to catch their companions. The loose pony, a stocky dun animal with a wicked rolling eye, eluded them skillfully as Brand came round the corner, and then, like a sinking ship, subsided onto the ground and tried to roll. The high-pommeled saddle prevented it, but 2 saddlebags fell from their moorings, and the unhorsed monk uttered a most unecclesiastical oath and leapt to their rescue, elbow forgotten. Brand stuck his heels once more into Greedy's hairy sides, and summoning up the horsemanship which life with the Godwins was gradually instilling, came alongside the dun as it rolled the right way up again. He grabbed its bridle. The dun laid back its ears, but stood still. Brand slid out of the saddle, and leading both ponies went to help the monk, who was muttering anxiously over some bright and sparkling objects which had tumbled out of the saddlebags. He flicked mud from them with hands that shook. "Here's your horse, father," Brand said. "My thanks, my son. My thanks. My most grateful thanks." The monk looked at the pony without much enthusiasm. "You're not hurt, I hope," Brand said. Or, your goods?" He leant closer to look, intrigued by the glitter, and almost gasped. The monk smiled and let him look, though the smile held a trace of nenisness. The other 2 now came up close to Brand, their faces watchful beneath their hoods. Brand said, "I am on an errand from Earl Godwin's manor. I belong there. I shan't steal your goods, father. Don't be afraid of me. They're beautiful." There were several things. One was a gold box, with birds and marmouse animals carved intricately over its surface. There was also a set of jewelry, of a kind which had lately become a fashion among the women: bracelet, finger ring, and cloak brooch, made of gold and set with red stones. And there was what appeared to be a baby's toy, a rattle, but with beads of gold. The workmanship of all the pieces was, in its meticulousness and love, as satisfying as the swordsmith's work had been. The objects were perfect for their uses: a repository, ornaments, a plaything. And they were finished with a fineness of detail which allowed the eye to stare as minutely as it would, without finding any disappointment. "Trom Godwin's house, you say?" the monk asked. "That's where we're bound ourselves." "Are you?" "But—" Brand looked at them. "Just, forgive me, but just 3 monks together, with such precious things as these? A monk's habit can be as good a protection as—" "A full set of armor," said the monk, closing up the saddlebags. "No one expects us to be carrying costly goods, or if we are, then they're holy relics and untouchable." "Are these holy relics, then?" Brand asked. "They didn't look as if they were." "No, not this time." The monk reluctantly took the reins of the dun pony as Brand held them out to him. "They're gifts from Earl Godwin's cousin Abbot Sparhawfach of Abingdon, for the Lady Githa's new child, and for Lady Gytha. Has the child come yet?" "No, not yet." "Are you the messenger Lady Gytha mentioned today, coming from Oxfordshire and overdue?" She was anxious. "Yes, that would be us. We were delayed when my pony went lame. I wouldn't set out on purpose on a spawn of Satan like this." He nodded at the dun, which rolled its eyes again. "He was the only animal to be had in that hamlet where we left my Genda Dapple. He scraped me off under a tree this morning, and then tried to roll with me in a river." "If you don't want to ride him again," said Brand, who had already noticed that the other 2 monks were not good horsemen and felt that the third was probably as bad, "you can take mine." "He's lazy and you'll have to kick him along, but he won't roll or try to get you off." "I'll try your dun devil. We all seem to be going to the same place, so we can ride along together." "That's uncommonly good of you, my son." The monk looked thankful. "You have a good heart. Did you ever think of entering religion?" "No," said Brand truthfully. Then, since this reply seemed bald to the point of discourtesy, he said, "I think I have no vocation." The monk, pausing in the act of mounting Greedy, peered at him. "Aye, maybe you're right. If you had a vocation, you'd know. And if you haven't, then God perhaps has other work for you. If God wants you, he'll shout, 'That's what I say.' There's many a man, and many a woman too, in the church that was pushed there by other people and shouldn't have been." He settled in the saddle at last, and Brand helped him fasten the saddlebags to it. The other monks watched, still wary, keeping nearby, gathering up Greedy's reins after a final comforting rub to his bruised elbow. Brand's new friend said, "We should introduce ourselves. I am Brother Athelstan. These are the brothers Alphon and Hugh, who is French and has no English. We have to talk Latin to him. And you are—" "Brand, my name is. I am learning the skills of arms in Earl Godwin's household." "Brand. That means a sword. Good English name, but there's Welsh blood in you from your black eyebrows, am I right? And you have their love of fine works of art. I saw it when you looked at the abbot's gifts." "Ah." Suddenly he leant forward and stared into Brand's eyes. "You'll fall in love with a woman for her beauty one day, my boy, and likely enough she'll break your heart." Embarrassed, Brand said, "Abbot Sparhawfach has sent very wonderful gifts. Who made them?" As he spoke, he mounted the dun pony. He was going to be very late indeed, he thought, though it might not matter now. "Why, he did," said Brother Athelstan. "The abbot, I mean. He's one of the finest goldsmiths in the land. He's fit to turn a royal crown any time." The monk called Alphen said, "Should we not hurry?" At the manor the steward took charge of the newcomers, and Brand, having seen the ponies stabled, went in search of his colleagues. He saw to his surprise that the targets beyond the hall were still deserted. Then he hesitated because of a sudden uproar echoing from the hall itself. Ears pricking, he slipped through the door. It sounded as if a battle were about to start. He stepped straight into the eye of the storm. As he shut the door, a heavy body hurtled backwards onto him. He grabbed the doorpost for support, and Swain bounced off him to land on the floor, where he sat angrily rubbing a reddened ear. Nearby, Bjorn sat on a bench looking amazedly at his uncle. In mid-floor stood Godwin, breathing hard, furious. Githa and the girls by the loom watched with great interest. Githa was calm, but the girls were frankly agog, and no weaving was in progress. Godwin caught sight of Brand. "Ah, so we're all here. You can share in this, boy. Pick yourself up, Swain. Sit by Brand. Now, Liss, 10. He addressed Brand directly. "The question," he said, "asked by my son Swain concerns the times when a man may or may not kill. An important question that we must have's ear." Godwin glared at his eldest son. Swain glared back but did not speak. "You may," said Godwin, adopting a public tone and standing with feet apart, "slay in battle. We all know that. You may slay from the rear if your enemy is running away and will not cast down his weapons or otherwise yield. You may by stratagem kill a known enemy to your lord or your family, to save lives among his folk or your own. But you may not kill unarmed men unless they are condemned criminals or hostages whose lives are lawfully forfeit, and—" He was coming to the heart of it now, to the reason why, a moment ago, he had struck Swain, and his face hardened. You may not kill for private gain, for that strikes at the roots of trust. You may not kill one who trusts you, who may even look to you for protection, such as a comrade or a follower or even a thrall, unless or until they in some way betray you. There must be loyalty between equals, and from lord to man also, as much as from a manto his leader. Swain, still feeling his ear, said, "But if such a one, say, had knowledge that might be dangerous to you?" "No," said Godwin Violandi. There was an odd last-ditch air about him, as though he were making a final defense of some private stronghold. The killing required in war is one thing, murder is another. God have mercy on your soul if you can't tell the difference. Bjorn said suddenly, "Uncle, you said it was permitted to kill a known foe by stratagem." Godwin turned to him. "It is. What if the enemy is a man who has reason to trust you? It happened once at home. One of my father's jarls found that a friend of his drew as in some scheme to kill my father. He did not know what had to do, because his friend had once saved his life when they ere on a battlefield." "That's a good, definite example," Godwin said. "Well, what happened? He warned my father without naming names. But the plot nearly succeeded because my father still didn't know which way to look for his enemy." At the end of the hall, Geetha was studying a broken thread on the loom. She glanced round. "In such a case," she observed, with her characteristic air of having only a tenth of her mind on what she was saying, while the rest was engaged on what she was doing, "you may betray your friend or your guest or your follower, or you may cause others to betray those who similarly trust them. You may not murder for your own convenience, but you may do so on your lord's behalf. One's duty to one's lord and his house is absolute. Any treachery is permitted in the cause of it." Godwin spun round. No one could have missed the bitter edge on Githa's voice. Her husband's expression was one of bewildered anguish, as if he had been stabbed in the back by his best friend. Anger followed the bewilderment, his face suffused. He opened his mouth. Githa rose. "I think," she said with masterly timing, that our new child will be here before midnight." They saw that she was pale, and she bit the last word off short. Recovering herself, she said, "Ladies, will one of you fetch Halfear's W? I've Aldith and sent her to my chamber." And gathering her skirts clear of the rushes, she surged forward, past the stupefied men and out of the door. Her ladies trailed out after her. The door shut behind them. Swain turned savagely on his cousin. "Did you have to say that? You and—" "Your clever questions, showing off how earnest you are. Making trouble." Bjorn gazed at him blankly. "What in the name of Valhalla are you talking about? You were the one who asked if a man should follow his leader to exile, as I recall. And you were the one who suggested it might be allowable to kill someone you privately feared or disliked. If your head aches, it's your own fault, and if it has started off some family quarrel in this hall, it's your own fault again. What do I know of your old disputes? I'm a stranger here, as you never tire of telling me." Godwin had walked up to them. He said, "Be quiet, both of you. Swain," Bjorn asked his question in all good faith, and you know that quite well. "Bjorn, you are, as you say, a stranger here, but that I think must now be changed. You are a son of mine now, or as good as—" He quelled Swain with a frown. "And there are family matters, which I must soon discuss with you. You are of Anaj and living here on such terms as make it necessary. Then you will understand what Swain is talking about. Swine, go out to the archery targets with the rest and help Oswald to organize a contest. If you ever again advocate murder for private satisfaction, I will throw you out of my house. The next step after that kind of talk is the sword drawn in temper. On a man who carries none, you have much to learn." "Bah!" said Swain. "Don't you know what all that was about?" Longshanks whispered to Brand as they went out with the rest, collecting their bows on the way. Brand, lifting his weapon from its hook on the wall, shook his head. "Some old family squabble or feud, I suppose," he said. "It's no concern of ours." "Your daughter, sir," said Aldith, handing the bundle to its father. "Her hair," she added, "will be red." "I should suspect the worst if it was black," said Godwin. "Githa?" Githa poked a sleepy face out from the sewn fawnskins. She extended an arm, and Godwin gave her the baby. "I feel I've done this before," he said. 8 times now, Githa told him. She added, "Aldith says she favors you, but they all look the same to me. Twisted up faces and nothing like anybody. Even Swain, and look how handsome he is now." They were briefly silent, remembering that first birth. Godwin had spent it in a state of dread, trying to hide his fears in busy tie-in to estate tasks and hearty offhand remarks to his friends on women's business and Githa's customary excellent health. He hadn't convinced either himself or the friends. When Aldith came at last to say it was a son and vigorous and the mother was safe, he had abandoned pretense and rushed headlong to Githa, leaving his dignity behind him. And Swain in Githa's arms had looked much as this girl-child did now, even to the ginger tuft of hair on top. "Swain was noisier," he said. "He squalled in my face and frightened me half to death. And he's still a devil. He never profits by example." Githa sighed. Her serenity clouded. "What is it?" he asked. "Are the examples always perfect?" Githa said. Godwin sighed in turn. "Githa, don't desert me, even in your mind. Please. I know what you think. You made it plain this afternoon. I was angry, but I know what you feel and why. Only it's too late now. Thane Edwin came in while you were birthing. Atheling Alfred has accepted. Only Alfred, not Edward, but one will be less son enough, and that lesson must be given. Must. I shall send Bran north very soon. Githa." He added after a moment, "Sparhafuk's messengers brought your gifts today too, did you know?" "The women told me yes. Godwin, I still worry. We may be called to account for Atheling Alfred one day. Thane, Edwin, is wholly my man, and will swear he acted in good faith. Geetha, it will be all right. If it isn't, said Geetha, I will be with you. If there is guilt, I share it. I have had a part in it. God have mercy on us both. What name shall we give? Our daughter. Didn't you once suggest Gunhild for a girl? Eric Merchant of Dover was content. By the elbow of God he had done it. At last. It had taken enough time and toil, years and years of putting by, of economical travel on dirty ships with pest-ridden bedding, of cleaver buying and cleverer selling. But now the great moment had come. He stood with a rope in his hand, waiting to throw it to the first ship chartered exclusively for him, as it came into harbor with a load of merchandise all his own, back from the first voyage he had ever financed, without aid. If he could do that 3 times, he would merit the rank of Thane. Thane! What a blessing it was, he thought, weighing the rope in his hand and pushing the long flaxen hair out of his eyes. To be part of a civilized folk where one could rise through trading and intelligence, instead of only by hitting more men. Over the head with an axe than other people could. His own grandfather had been a Danish freebooter, but Eric was not proud of his grandfather. Most people could trace their lineage to near savages in their near ancestry, but you needn't boast of it. Reading and writing and calculation were the true skills of the future. They were the key to tomorrow's treasure chest, not battle axes. The ship's oars plashed as she came smoothly to rest against the quay. There was his son Rolf on board, his second son, since Ordgar, the elder, was on a trading trip inland. Rolf flourished an upturned thumb, token of a good expedition. A fine boy. Eric had had doubts about trusting him with the buying on this momentous trip, but Rolf must have his chance sometime, and he himself had fallen sick at sailing time. He cast the rope. The sailors pulled it in and made fast, and Eric jumped aboard. He did not doubt that this voyage was the first of a triumphant trio. 2 years ago, he had given hospitality to an old vagabond woman who had told the household fortunes in return for a supper of smoked pork, rye bread, beans, and ale. A mighty destiny was his, written in his hand, she said, looking up from his palm with bright black eyes that must once have been shining ornaments in a face of great beauty. They still shone from the lined and nearly toothless ruins of that face. It's something you'll do, but I can't be seeing what. He wondered where she came from with that dark skin and those eyes. Wales, perhaps. It was a land of witchcraft. But it'll change the course of the world, she said in her cracked sing-song voice, and she smiled horribly, showing 2 brown fangs like those of a worn-out werewolf. So best beware of all you do. Who knows when your hour will come? 5 minutes. Later she had promised his daughter Hild a visit to court and a husband near to a great overlord. And then he thought he saw the riddle's answer. He would become a Thane, of course. No one below that rank could get a powerful husband for his daughter or change the course of history either. Well, Rolf, he said, embracing his son. And what have you brought? Rolf started an inventory as the unloading began. Unloading was a nuisance. Saving up to finance voyages was all very well, but one day they must build a better warehouse, nearer to the harbor. The stuff had to be carted much too far as things were, and hiring an ox cart was costly too. Eric stood by his son, checking tallies against the bales and bundles as they came ashore. The Byzantine silverware would sell well in Winchester, where Queen Emma's court was, and silks were also very marketable. But he'd paid too much for the wine. No, wait till you taste it, Rolf said. It's a find. Maybe, but you should have brought some cheaper stuff as well. I did. That comes next. Bales of cloth, dye pigments, spices, ginger, root and a sack of peppers, and some cinnamon, Rolf said. Too much, said Eric disapprovingly. Folk can grow their own herbs. There's not so much demand for these fancy Eastern delicacies. But the boy had done well, he thought privately, thought there was no sense in overpraising him. Eric would have done worse at the same age. He rested a hand on Rolf's shoulder as they full-load the last bale to the ox carts. They were in the store, carrying out a fussy double-check on the tallies. Eric believed in making sure, when Hild came. She uttered a squeak of joy on seeing Rolf and ran to him. "Rolf, you're home. How brown you look. Was it a good voyage? Did you meet any pirates?" "By God's grace, no," said Rolf. "A nice titbit we should have been for them if we had." He pulled his sister's brown plaits. "What put pirates into your head?" "Little Hild?" "Oh." Hild turned to her father. "Father, we have guests. They've just landed from Flanders. They met pirates. It's a young, he must be a Thane at least. He's dressed so fine. And some of Heisman. Normans, I think. Is it all right?" Eric sighed. As a future man of rank, he felt it right to start getting used to his dignity in advance. He had built himself a bigger house during the year after the fortune-teller's advent. It had Aegst House within its palisade and its own well and looked impressive. But it was not only prepared for guests, it also, unfortunately, attracted them. And Eric had discovered that he did not much like having strangers, sometimes rude ones, in his house. He fought an endless running battle between his wishes and his duties over hospitality. He was only thankful that as his business was now prospering, there was not too much conflict over expense. "It will have to be," he said irritably now. "Is he a well-spoken man? Is he Norman like his followers?" "He's very polite," said Hild. "He looks like a Norman, his hair's short, but he speaks our tongue. That's why I said a Thane. I think he's English, whatever his followers are." "How many followers has he got?" "He says 600. What are only a score or so are with him at our house," said Hild hastily. "The rest are lodged round the town." "I don't understand this." Eric signed to Rolf to finish with the tallies, and they locked up the warehouse. "I don't understand at all," he said again, as they began the walk home. "A young lord with a following of that strength, and he's English while they aren't. Who is he? Why did he not go to the town Reeves house? That's the proper place." "No room there," said Hild. "No room." "Are we being invaded?" "I don't know," said Hild helplessly. "What was I to say?" "Well, what is his name? He told you that much, surely." "Yes," said Hild doubtfully. At 13, she sometimes found filling. Her dead mother's place a heavy task. She carried a grown-up burden, but grown-ups didn't always realize it, and they gave silly teasing answers to important and necessary questions, such as those about their names and business. He said he was called Alfred the Atheling, or Alfred. "The exile. I didn't know what he meant." "Alfred Atheling." Eric stopped short. "But that's Queen Emma's younger son, by King Ethelred. If he really is who he says he is." "How old is he? 20s? 30s? Dark or fair?" "20s, I think," said Hild. "He's dark." "It could be." Eric resumed his stride. "We're in noble company if so. But what has brought— Well, that isn't our business. Rolf, if that wine is all you say it is, you had best go back and fetch some to the house. Alfred Atheling. Here, well, well, well. But your brother could not come? A pity, but we will give you a welcome doubly warm to make up for it. You haven't lost your English, I notice." Earl Godwin bowed graciously and extended an ungloved right hand to his young guest. In the background, bursting with pride at this splendid meeting in his very own courtyard, stood Eric Merchant. It was a crowded meeting as well as a splendid one. Before Eric's door stood Alfred, flanked by his friend Fulbert Fitzwarren, a fully armed Norman knight. About 10 more knights were lined up behind him, a forbidding row of mailed figures who looked all alike since the nose-pieces of their helmets took all individuality out of me. Their faces. Facing Alfred stood Godwin, respectfully bareheaded, the sun catching the russet lights in his thick, springy hair. Behind him stood his 3 eldest sons and a group of thanes, all in armor, and inside the gate, 100 housecarls, had crowded, also armoured, and equipped with axes. The two principals, however, were vivid in tunics and mantles of dyed wool. Godwin was in turquoise and tawny, Alfred in crimson under blue. Gold and jewelry glittered expensively about their persons. Behind the smooth, formal phrases of greeting, they appraised each other. "I trust you had a safe journey," Godwin said, as, with an arm about the guest's shoulders, he led the way into the hall for the wine and sweetmeats Eric was longing to serve. "We had a short encounter with pirates," Alfred said. "At least we think they were pirates." His gaze traveled sideways, scanning the Earl's impassive face. "I have a few men hurt, but none seriously. They will all be able to travel in a day, or two, if the delay is permitted." "I am glad it was no worse," said Godwin courteously. His face told nothing beyond a correct, moderate concern, befitting news of that commonplace hazard of the sea, a pirate attack. Alfred had hoped at this point of the meeting to know at last whether he were a truly welcome guest or had come as a coney into a snare. He was disappointed. They took their seats in the hall, and Eric snapped his fingers towards Hild, who scurried to fetch the refreshments. "Tell me," said Godwin calmly as the wine was poured, "more of this attack." "That merchant was a comic little fellow," Harold Godwinson remarked, riding at Alfred's side as the cavalcade, which with Godwin's and Alfred's men combined, resembled a small army at last set out from Dover. "His wine was excellent," said Alfred. "Do all merchants live sole in England now?" Harold laughed. "No, I think it was his own stock for sale, brought out to honor his noble guests." "Well, it should help his future trade. My father has ordered a consignment. IVI Father sends his apologies, by the way, for not riding with you this morning. He's gone on ahead to see that the arrangements for our night's lodging are all they should be. He asked me to entertain you." "Thank you," said Alfred. In the 3 days they had spent at Dover, while Alfred's injured men recovered, he had seen far more of Godwin's sons than of Godwin, and now, it appeared, the pattern was to continue. Godwin had been consistently busy, occupied with a lame horse, a dispute among the men, business with the town reeve. It was as though he did not want too much to do with the atheling, although when they did meet, his courtesy was unfailing. Alfred shifted uneasily in his saddle and thought again of the pirate fleet. He had himself had a small, hired fleet of ships, stout, fjord-built, 60-foot vessels with plenty of capacity but no great speed. The pirates had had a squadron of small, light ships, the kind the Northmen called skutas, which were built for speed and swift maneuvering. They had come up fast astern, and then had come the hail of burning arrows. Well, they'd got away through the sheer skill and experience of the sailors. The wind was fair, and they used their big square sails, aided by the power of their oars, to lengthen their lead. It couldn't be kept up long, not that kind of rowing. But the burst had won them breathing space enough to use the ebbing tide to their advantage. The hired captains knew their tides and their coastal shallows by heart, and in the end they had left their pursuers enmeshed by rocks and sandbanks as the white water began to break there. But it had been a near thing. Too near. And he had voiced his doubts to Godwin in Eric's hall at that first meeting. "There may be interests in the north that fear my coming." "Perhaps," Godwin said indifferently, "but let us hope that in the north your coming isn't known. I have provided a trustworthy escort. The Wessex men are the king's traditional bodyguard. Remember, you're in good hands." Grimly, Alfred told himself he hoped so. The route led along the old paved Roman road to Canterbury, where the first night of the journey was spent. The lodgings proved excellent. Next day, they rode along the ancient way that skirted the northernmost march of Andred Forest to pass the second night at a wayside monastery. On the third day, Godwin at last gave the atheling some of his company, telling him of the plans for the days ahead. "Lady Emma waits for you at Winchester," he said. "She travels little these days." "Is she well?" Alfred asked. He tried to imagine his straight-backed and ferociously energetic mother as aged and frail, and couldn't. Yet she must be well into her 50s by now. Well, age came to everyone. He had not seen her for more than 20 years. Well, but less active than she was once, Godwin said. We shall be there in 2 or 3 days now. We lie tonight at a town, unknown of my manners. They call it Gildenford, from the kingcups that turn the meads to gold where the road crosses the river way. I have had to make arrangements to lodge you all out among the townsfolk. My hall there is small, but there will be a feast ready. They rode on for a while in silence, and Godwin gradually dropped back on a narrowing stretch of road. When the track broadened again, Fulbert Fitzwarren jogged up alongside his friend. Yours is a fair, fertile country, he remarked quietly. If our escort were a little less overpowering, I should enjoy this ride. He glanced quickly fore and aft. Their numbers nearly equal our own, I should say. To do us honor or to control us? Which? I've been wondering, said Alfred, and 600 men looks like the wrong number to have brought. I should have brought 6, and looked completely harmless, or 6,000 and looked too strong to attack. As it is, I merely look provoking. We can only keep our eyes open and our swords loose in the sheath, said Fulbert philosophically. There's a deer. For England. Was indeed fair and fertile, and when Alfred could quiet his fears for a while, he found his heart going out to it. Northwards the land was more open, forest yielding place to turf and golden broom, and there were warm purple patches of clover and a silvering of daisies here and there. But southwards was the stronghold of Andred, green-shadowed under the arms, of ancient oaks and gigantic beeches, with glimpses here and there of natural glades, madly, magnificently, magically green with the young spring grass. It was still early in the day, and the web of a hammock spider sparkled in the wayside grasses, dazzling with dew. As a small boy, Alfred had listened to his half-pagan nurse, who told him that these were the beds of the little people, who were wicked, and mischievous and heartless and beautiful, beautiful beyond mortal imagining. He remembered her, his recollection suddenly grown vivid, and with the memory came others of timber-built halls and gold and silver tapestries and the taste of mead. They would feast in such a hall and on such mead when they got to Winchester. Winchester, where he was going to meet the mother he had not seen all his adult life. Or was this indeed a trap? But surely it couldn't be, not set by his own mother. If the pirate fleet had been sent by anyone, it must have been by the King of the North, who had got wind of the visit. One's own mother could not be involved. Yet there was no intimacy between Emma and her elder sons. She would be a stranger to him, and he, presumably, an equal stranger to her. He wondered how she would receive him. He did not hate her as Edward did, but nor had he any warmth for her. If she had treated him less badly, she had certainly neglected him. Her attitude to him had been passive lack of interest rather than the active dislike she gave Edward. He could not remember ever running to her with any childish trouble. Always he had gone to his nurse or to his father. In the years of his manhood, away from her, Alfred had taught himself to think of her unemotionally. He had also learnt a good deal about women in general, largely from his mistress Mabel, that witty, bewitching, and faithless grass widow of a pilgrim. From Mabel's malicious but usually accurate comments about mutual acquaintances, he had come to see what must have been wrong with his mother in the days when she was Ethelred's wife. Poor dear maid, he could hear Mabel saying in her high, glass-edged voice at some crowded feast. Look at that bright smile of hers. Her husband said something stupid again, and she's having to pretend she agrees with him. Emma, as he recalled her, had been a woman strong in mind and body, married to a man who was her inferior in both, though not actually ailing. Alfred had also learned to be dispassionate about his father. Ethelred would never admit the truth, and had demanded from Emma a conventional deference which she would not give him. Unlike Maid, Emma would not pretend to agree. He had refused to heed her warnings against attempting to buy off the Danish raiders, and she had openly called him a nithing for it. But it had indeed been unwise. Alfred had often been sorry for his father and had loved him. But it was a love without respect. On the other hand, he had respected Emma without loving her. In Ethelred's place, Canute would have fought the raiders. Well, Ethelred had also fought them at times, but he generally lost. Canute would have won. Emma had probably never needed to advise Nut when she was married to him. Reportedly, she had been happy with him. Understandable. In the more intimate part of their marriage, Ethelred must have been fairly adequate, Alfred supposed. He had given her 3 children. But you did not have to satisfy a woman to give her babies. It was enough to satisfy yourself. He recalled his mother's sudden tempers, the stormy air that went with her everywhere, the tension that gripped a room when she entered it. Mabel's voice spoke again in his mind. "Judith's taken a lover, they say. I expect it's true. She looks so peaceful. She used to be like a thunderstorm looking for somewhere to burst. I believe poor Thorold was very inept in bed. She told me once. She used to lie awake for hours afterwards, biting her nails, that Judith had had children too. People did tell Mabel things like that. She never kept their counsel, but she was willing to advise, and her advice, if sometimes cynical, was generally sound. She was not at heart cruel, but a sharp wit, like a fine dagger, couldn't spend all its time in the sheath." He wondered what she was doing now. Her husband was said to be on his way home. Alfred was not jealous. Long since he had concluded that it was unsafe to care too much for anyone. But he wished her image would stop haunting him. It was as though he were never going to see her again. During the afternoon they passed through a grove of silver birch, riding up a long incline which left the thick depths of Andred behind. At the top they found themselves looking ahead to hills that rolled in a long vista, blue-tinged in the distance, as if seen through clear water. A thread of river twinkled below, and the road led down to it. Where the ford must be was a wide expanse of meadow, dusted gold by some field flower. Beyond the river was a cluster of thatched roofs, with drifts of blue smoke slanting northeast in the light wind. On a small hill nearby, a high-roofed hall overlooked the little township. "My manor of Gildenford," said Godwin, cantering up and drawing rein at his guest's side. "I hope that my steward is ready for us. I sent him word of the numbers."